Hey everyone, it is George Couros. Welcome back to another episode of the Innovators Mindset Podcast. Since I wrote Forward Together, one of the questions that I get all the time is how do we get buy-in to new initiatives? This idea of like bringing people together to move toward something that they have created. Immediately, the question I struggle with because it's never about buy-in. The whole premise of Forward Together is how do we build ownership? That's a very different concept from buy-in. And when I wrote about this, I separated the two terms, the idea of buy-in versus ownership. And I wrote it like this: buy-in is more about convincing others to do something you hope they'll get excited to do, whereas ownership is about building something together. Now, in all honesty, the idea of buy-in takes way less time to incorporate. You can give the best speeches, do whatever you want, and get people excited about an initiative, but it doesn't mean it will last. Ownership is a harder process, but it's more likely to sustain because I don't want something to fall apart that I have contributed to creating. So that's something that really matters to me. And I really understood this when I had an awesome principal. And I've often talked about Kelly. She's really a mentor of mine over time. And the way that she did certain things that really got me excited and saw that my impact as a teacher went beyond my classroom. It was my fingerprints were all over the success of the school. And there was a point, I'll never forget this. I really cared about the school because of the impact that I had on the decisions as a teacher. And it wasn't something I'd really experienced before in education prior to that. I was at school one night and I was working on something. It was about 7 o'clock at night. It was something for a big event that we were doing as a school community. And I was there on my own time. And I'm not saying anyone has to be, go past their contract hours or anything like that. But I just remember being there that evening and I'm thinking, how is she doing this? Why am I excited to be here? And that's where ownership comes from. When you become a principal, that was something that I really noticed. It was really important the school is successful because if it wasn't, it was gonna come at me. Like I was gonna get the pushback on if it was successful. And one of the things that I've always said about leadership is it's kind of like reffing basketball. If you are a bad leader, everybody notices. If you're a great leader, people really don't pay attention to it. So that's the thing. It's the same with refs, right? You notice bad refs. So if a ref's really good, you don't even notice them in the game. And so I had a certain ownership because it was really, if something went wrong, I was going to get the call from the superintendent. And part of what I tried to create, and it's because of Kelly's influence, was really having ownership over the process, that people saw their contribution. So I talk about this in Forward Together. I'm telling you, if you want to build ownership and really build something that matters, that's why I tell you to get this book. One of the suggestions I talk about here, and I'm not going to, I'll share 3 ideas with you, but this is not one of them, but I think it's really powerful. When we did our staff professional learning, it's one of the things I talk about in the book. The staff actually not only created the professional learning opportunities on the PD days that we had, but they also determined the measures of success. So they were more likely to hit them because they were the ones who were deciding. Because if I say, look, listen, you're the experts in whatever area that you choose to lead within our school, if they are truly the experts, then they should actually determine what does success look like. If I'm not the expert, they are. Why am I determining success for them? So we hit every single measure that we were aiming for in those goals because people not only had access or influence over the destination, but also the journey. And that really, really matters. So I think that idea of ownership, and something that people can just say like, oh, we want to build ownership. And that's a beautiful thing to say, but what does it actually look like? How does this go beyond, it's just not buy-in like as a Trojan horse that we just kind of sneak in, but ownership is something that really, really matters. So I'm going to share 3 ideas that I've experienced, whether as an administrator or part of a team, in education. So the first one is I talk about how was your mission and vision being developed. So a little game that I ask people is like, hey, like if I go to the school district and they don't have their phones with them, like what's your mission and vision? What is your mission and vision? most people in school have no clue. They have no clue. And I talk about this in the newsletter where I wrote about this. And it's, is your mission and vision being created by a few people in, a smoky back room? That's just how I picture it. It's people that are just totally disconnected, smoking cigars. See, this is the vision, see? And kind of go and do that. That's kind of how I picture it. That's not a good process. Now, I don't think it's filled with cigar smoke, but I do think there are a lot of districts that it's just a small group of people that are in certain roles that decide it for others. And it might sound really good. It might look good on paper. It might look good on a wall, but it doesn't mean that people are excited about it. It just means you feel good about it. Maybe it's good PR, but not necessarily something that you're going to build over time. So the experience that I had, and I loved it. I worked in a school district, and now, beautifully enough, I get to lead this with some organizations because I was part of it as a staff member. And basically, we brought in different parts of the community, and this could be families, obviously staff, whether it's support staff, teaching staff, administrators. We had students there. We also had business organizations there too, because if schools are bad, that affects business in the community. So we wanted to bring them in to be excited about what we could possibly create together. So we had a facilitator who basically would ask us all these questions. We talked about like, what do we expect from school? What's the hope? What's the future? And just people had different insights and through this process. So it was a long-term process. This could have been done way quicker, to be honest with you. And when I say it could be done way quicker, smoky cigar room, right? That's how it can be done quicker because it's just done for you. But we had a lot of really great discussions, and some people didn't agree with some things, and there was a lot of, back and forth. There's a little bit of conflict, which I think is a good thing because that helps you find the best solution. And so ultimately the facilitator took all of our input and then suggested like, hey, here's some like mission and visions, just kind of starting points that we could talk about. And then we actually went through that process and then we created. Now, obviously we couldn't invite everybody. That's impossible to have. Like now you can get input in different ways. But, in a room having those conversations, they were representative. But because I was one of the representatives, part of my role was to talk to staff members in my school and get their insights, get their thoughts and ideas. And so ultimately, I knew it very well because we tried to live it, because we helped create it. And that matters to people, right? If you see your fingerprints all over this too, and let's say this too, like when you're bringing families in, when families have input on the mission and vision of the school, they're going to become your advocates. I've talked about this extensively, is how do we move people from the notion of adversaries to advocates, where they are also promoting in their circles what really matters, because parents always listen to parents. We got to like take advantage of that and leverage that. So now you want that mission and vision to succeed because you've helped create it. And this actually leads to the second part. Do we create a culture that invites challenge? So as I said, we talked about this, and it could have been easy. The superintendent said, like, here's what I think and whatever. And then we just kind of go along with it, whatever. But we really wanted to have this space for challenge and pushback, because you're trying to, and I used to say this to my staff all the time, it's not about your idea or my idea. It's about the best idea. We do not matter where it comes from. So we're trying to figure out what is the best solution. And so you want pushback. You want a little conflict. And because that was the culture that I worked in and I hoped to create in my experience, I pushed back on a word that was in that mission and vision. And it's going to sound weird at first, but it'll make sense in a second. I really pushed back on the goal of like success for students. That was the issue, was the word students. And it's not that I didn't want success for students, but I wanted something more. I saw something more all encompassing. So I actually said, why can't it be learners? And that actually broadens who this is. And it also creates a little, if we're making a vision that we're trying to find success for learners, then that's us, as long as we're willing to continuously grow. There's like a little deal here. Like, hey, as long as you're willing to continue to grow, you can't say, look, I've been teaching forever. I don't need to do this stuff. Maybe we're not the place for you. Maybe, so there's like, now there's a little bit in that process. So learners was all encompassing. And I share this because, first of all, I think that's really where we need to be focusing is how do we, all of us in education, really develop as learners, but also who is the mission and vision serving? Is it obviously the largest part of the population of students, but can it be everybody as long as they're willing to grow? I would have never said anything if we did not create that space where we would push back on these ideas. And that's something that is really crucial. And you have to get ego out of it. You have to, part of it is we have to really talk about like, hey, we really need to challenge ideas, but be respectful of people. So I wasn't saying, hey, that idea that you shared is stupid. Not like that at all. It was just asking the question, hey, why would we use the term students instead of learners? Why wouldn't we use the term learners? Because that much is more encompassing. And, no one's, well, I said students, so now I feel attacked. That's not it at all. You have to create that culture because you are looking for the best ideas. And if you truly want to be successful, whatever your role is, it doesn't mean you always have the right answers. It's that you together find the right solutions. And that leads to the third one, is feedback acted upon. And I'm very proud that the word was switched and that learner, became part of what we actually do. But that was something I wanted to really create, in my communities that I had the opportunity to serve as an administrator, is if I asked you for feedback, would I actually do something with it? And I didn't want to just ask for it just to make you feel nice. And I wrote this, I wrote it with this, is, this whole day of like, I need to feel heard. I need to feel heard, right? And I get it. But sometimes, when people say that, it's like they just let you talk, but they don't actually listen to what you're saying. That's not really being heard. And it doesn't mean that every, pushback, every comment you act upon, like that you change your direction because of it, because we would change our direction all the time. But you always consider things. You consider it. And even when you don't necessarily agree with it, can you give the reason like, hey, I understand what you're saying, but here's why we can't do this part. This goes to something I used to do as an administrator. And I get some eye rolls when I talk about this, but maybe because I felt there's times where I've worked with administrators and they would do this thing where they would try to get you to say a solution that they wanted you to say, but it's really what they wanted you to do. But they would try to manipulate you. This is the whole concept of buy-in. And I remember having this conversation where they were trying to get me around the solution. I just said, hey, listen, just tell me what you want. Just tell me what you want me to do. Just tell me that. Like, you're my boss. Just tell me what you want to do. Don't play this game where you are trying to get me around to a solution, because it's just going to take way longer to get me to say what you want me to say. Just tell me what you need to do. That's it. I'm good. Right. And so I don't like that feeling. And that's why maybe I'm a little biased against this term buy-in, is because sometimes it's like, feels like a manipulation more than anything. So this is the eye roll part that people might not like. I used to say this to my staff. Listen, if I ask you for input on something, I'm genuinely open to your feedback, and it could change the direction of what we're going to do. But I will tell you, some things we have no say on. There's nothing I can do. There's no way I can change it, because maybe it's a directive from, the province or the state, wherever you're at. It might be a directive from the school district office. I have no say over it. So we can have conversations about it. I'm fine with it, but I'm going to tell you up front, nothing's going to change. So I don't want you to feel that if I ask you, when I give you an opportunity for input on it, that it can change, right? So we can talk about it, but it's not going to change anything. So I would never once did my staff want to talk about things they knew they couldn't change. Because I'd be open up front with it. But the times that I did ask for that input, we would have some really great discussions. And I share this one story in Forward Together. And I'm going to tell you, it's a hard one to share. I can't remember what it was, but I actually went to, I brought something up to my staff, and we had a conversation with it. And it was about I can't even remember what the initiative was, but I distinctly remember I thought they were all going to agree with me, or at least the majority, and we're going to kind of move forward. And I will tell you, I was in the very small minority of that group, and they were adamantly against what I was saying. So I actually remember having this story, this part, and basically I shared this idea, and I said, "Listen, okay, I get it, and you know what? I promised you that I would truly listen to, and so we're not going to do it. All I ask of you, let's give this 6 months, and then we can revisit. Let's see how it works in the future. So that's all I'm asking you of your principal. I will go in the direction that you said because I promised you, and that's like it's hard to share because it was hard because I was like, I always kind of thought the principal was the boss and all that other stuff, but really there was something bigger than just having this one moment in that process. And I remember my assistant principal said, I know that was hard. She pulled me aside and she said, I know it was hard for you, but you did the right thing. And I was like, oh, whatever. And I remember I was like, yeah. But she was right. I did the right thing. And I share this in Forward Together. When building community, it is essential to recognize what you can lose when you're obsessed with winning over we. So yes, I felt that I had lost in that moment because my thoughts as the principal were not the ones that ultimately were the decision. But I knew that if I promised them I would listen to their impact or their feedback, their influence, and then I didn't act upon it when it was like overwhelmingly against something I said, that I might have won in the short term, but long term I would have lost my staff. And I think honestly, they had a different respect for me when I did that because they knew I disagreed with them, and I still kind of like, bit my tongue and went ahead with what they had decided. So I know sometimes, hey, like there's some times where you wouldn't do that, but I just want to share that because it's also to admit that it's not always easy, but doing the right thing is not always easy. And that was the right thing, was to, in that moment, to go with them. And I wrote this, and so those ideas, and I'll go over them quickly. Again, the idea of how is your mission and vision being developed? Do people see their fingerprints over the solution? And then the second one, do we create a culture that invites challenge? Do we create that space where we encourage people to push back on ideas, because we're not looking for whose idea wins. It's about finding the best idea. And then the last one is that feedback act upon. I want to share one last thing on this one. This has always been a little thing that's kind of bothered me. Student voice conferences. I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to students. It's not what I'm saying at all. But people pat themselves on the back because they're like, oh, we brought students and we heard them. This is why I don't like the oh, I feel so heard. Because a lot of times we bring people, students together, we actually have them to have conversations. And then what do we do with it? Like, do we actually do we say like, hey, because of what you said at this conference, because of what you said at this event, because of this is some things that we're going to change. And actually, you said this, so we're going to do this. Here's the other part of it too, and I think this matters. Hey, you really were adamant about this, but we can't do it because of this. Even when you can't go in the direction, at least saying to people, here's why we can't do it, and give them an explanation, that actually is when people feel heard. They might not be happy about the solution, but it's like, hey, we're telling you, like, we heard you, we understand your viewpoint, but we can't go this way because of A, B, and C. To have that conversation. So if you are asking for input, but you don't actually act upon the input, then that's the issue. And it doesn't mean you always go that direction, but when you don't, why? Why didn't you? I think that's a really important conversation. So I end this email, and this is based on an email I'm working on right now, this newsletter. I share this. As a reminder, buying can create short-term movement, but ownership creates long-term commitment. People may comply with an initiative because they're told to, expected to, or even inspired to in the moment. But ownership changes the relationship entirely. When people help build something, they are more likely to protect, improve, and sustain it over time because it feels like theirs, not someone else's. Ownership is not about every person winning every argument. People can disagree with decisions and still feel ownership when they know their voice mattered in the process. It is imperative to create spaces where people feel heard, valued, and connected not only to the destination, but also their influence on the journey. That's why ownership matters, is that it's not just about where you're going, it's also how you get there. So I just want to share that with y'all. I sometimes, I just love doing this stuff. Sometimes I like to, I'm working on this email. I'm going to publish it soon. You're hearing this after that. And hopefully I'll remember to link it. But listen, check out Forward Together. You want to build ownership in your school where people really care about where we go? I want to share it with you. Very proud of this book. I think it's bringing people together in a way that maybe has not been evidence in the last several years, and that's what I'm really excited about. I want to be the guy who brings people together, and I think that when we bring people together to create, we will create better solutions. You do way more working together than you ever do being divided. So just something I want to share with you all. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for all you do. Take care.